Think about those moments in healthcare, the ones that really stick with you, maybe getting a diagnosis or figuring out a tough treatment. But what about the actual conversations themselves? We've all heard stories, right? Vital information maybe gets lost, or a patient just feels completely unheard. So much really hangs on that communication being clear, being empathetic between the professional and the patient. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really comprehensive guide about mastering this skill, specifically for healthcare. Our mission really is to unpack what makes these conversations work, what makes them effective, and maybe reveal some surprising things about how even small communication choices can change everything.
Yeah, and what's so powerful, I think, is that even though we're talking healthcare settings, clinics, hospitals, the principles, they're pretty much universal. Anyone who needs to get complex information across clearly or build trust, handle difficult conversations, educators, managers, you name it. There's a huge value here. We'll show you how to make that real connection.
Okay, let's unpack that then.
Right.
So our sources emphasize that good clinical communication. It isn't just, listing facts. It's more dynamic. It's about gathering information, yes, but also giving explanations that people actually understand. And this is critical, showing genuine empathy.
Right, that holistic view is absolutely key. Especially because these skills, they're often assessed in structured role plays. Picture it. You step into maybe a 5-minute scenario. You only had about 3 minutes to prep. You're the healthcare professional, and someone else, an interlocutor, plays the patient or maybe a family member. So the real question becomes, what are they actually looking for? It's more than just the words, right?
Exactly. And this is where it gets really insightful. There are 8 core criteria they use for assessment. And sure, some are obvious, like grammar and expression. We expect that. But our sources point out that things like relationship building and understanding the patient perspective, those are often the trickiest ones to nail consistently, especially under pressure. And yet they probably have the biggest impact on trust, on outcomes. It really is a whole view, challenging us to look beyond just what is said to the quality of the whole interaction. Okay, so these criteria sound complex. How do they actually play out in, the real world, in those everyday interactions? Well, our sources map this out. They describe several common role play types that really do mirror typical healthcare situations.
And these scenarios, they're designed very specifically to test a whole range of skills. So you might find yourself doing history taking, asking, okay, when did this pain start? Or maybe giving advice, like explaining, look, you really need to take the full course of these antibiotics. Then there are reassurance scenarios. Sometimes just saying you're not alone in dealing with this is crucial. You'll also see discharge or follow-up stations, right? Avoid heavy lifting for 6 weeks. And even handover situations.
Handover.
Yeah, where you need to communicate really clearly with, say, another nurse or doctor about the patient's status.
Gotcha. So each one needs maybe a slightly different angle, a different focus, but it's interesting how those core communication principles, they seem to underpin all of them. Okay, building trust. That's got to be central, especially in healthcare. What do the sources say about how to start that connection, particularly when, let's be honest, time is often really tight?
Well, the emphasis is definitely on building rapport and doing it quickly, but also authentically. Simple things can make a huge difference, like, how are you feeling today? Just asking that. Or, I'd really like to understand a bit more about what's been happening with you. And once you've made that opening, the next thing is just absolute clarity, crystal clear communication.
Right, and I think we've all been there, scratching our heads over medical jargon. But what about the counter-argument? Sometimes technical terms are needed for precision, aren't they? How do the sources tackle that balance?
That's a really good point. And the guide doesn't say never use medical terms. Instead, it's about strategies to bridge that gap. So it means actively checking understanding, using phrases like, okay, just to clarify what I mean by that, or so just to confirm, you understood X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
It also means really trying not to interrupt the patient, and yet translating complexity into plain English where you can without dumbing it down.
That translation part is huge, isn't it? And the advice here seems super practical. Like, instead of hypertension, just say high blood pressure. Makes sense. Or breaking information down, maybe into 3 key points max at a time, so it's digestible.
Exactly, bite-sized chunks.
And using analogies, I liked the fat in a pipe one for cholesterol. It helps people visualize it. Plus, always offering to explain more or repeat phrases like, let me explain how this works, or even just, would you like me to go over that again? That can be so helpful.
Absolutely. Takes the pressure off the patient, feeling like they should understand first time.
Okay, but healthcare conversations aren't always straightforward, are they? Things can get difficult. What about when patients are upset, maybe angry, anxious, maybe even refusing treatment? That feels like where communication skills are really put to the test.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where emotional intelligence really has to kick in. It's indispensable. The strategies recommended are pretty clear. First, stay calm yourself. That's foundational. Then, acknowledge the emotion directly. Something like, I can see this is incredibly frustrating for you. Don't shy away from naming it. And offer genuine reassurance, let's work together on this. Let's try and find a solution. What's really eye-opening in the source material isn't just knowing this stuff, but the discipline it takes to do it consistently, especially when you're feeling stressed yourself. And the guide is very clear on what to avoid.
Like what?
Things like blaming the patient, or making promises you can't keep, or just being dismissive. And these might sound obvious, but they're surprisingly common pitfalls, and they just destroy trust instantly.
It's so true. Okay, so beyond the words themselves, the delivery matters hugely. Our sources really dig into this pronunciation, intonation, even the pace you speak at. It's like this invisible layer.
Totally invisible, but so impactful. Obviously, clear pronunciation is fundamental, especially with tricky medical terms or if there's a language difference. But what often gets less attention is intonation. Using a rising tone for questions, a falling one for statements. It conveys so much meaning, so much of your intent beyond the words. And pace. Well, speaking steadily is good, but also knowing when to pause, let key information really land. It raises that question, doesn't it? How do these subtle vocal things actively shape whether someone understands you, whether they feel connected, or whether they feel distanced?
That is such a critical point, because sometimes how you say something can totally change what the other person hears. And to really get a handle on that, the guide uses these mock role plays. They're like mini case studies, really insightful. There's one example of a practice nurse talking to a patient about high cholesterol.
Right. And in that one, the nurse really shines by explaining the test results in simple terms, like we discussed, but also by responding with real empathy when the patient pushes back a bit, feels resistant, and then offering advice that feels manageable, actionable. It's a great showcase of empathy, chunking information, and keeping it collaborative.
Okay, and there was another one, a GP taking a history.
Yeah, for abdominal pain. And the feedback there really highlights using a good mix of questions, open ones to let the patient talk, closed ones for specific details, and the importance of summarizing back. Okay, so what I'm hearing is it confirms understanding. Plus, balancing that natural conversational feel with using the necessary clinical terms appropriately. These examples really bring the principles to life, show how they work in practice.
Okay, so for you listening, here's a kind of checklist. A way to maybe gauge your own communication skills, drawn right from these sources. Ask yourself, can I open and close conversations confidently, warmly? Do I actively try to use an empathetic tone? Is that consistent? Am I careful about jargon? Or if I have to use it, do I explain it straight away? Do I actually invite the other person to ask questions, to clarify, and make sure we're on the same page? How do I handle resistance? Or difficult emotions? Can I manage that effectively, stay composed? Is my speech generally clear? Is it well-paced, not too fast, not too slow? And maybe the biggest one, have I actually practiced these things? Have I ever asked for feedback?
And building on that last point, here's a final super practical tip. It sounds simple, but it's surprisingly powerful. Record yourself. Just play back a conversation, maybe a professional one, or even just explaining something complex to a friend. You'll catch things, maybe pronunciation that isn't clear, slightly awkward phrasing, intonation that sounds a bit flat or unnatural, things you'd probably never notice in the heat of the moment. It's an incredibly useful tool for seeing yourself as others might see you, for self-improvement.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean for you? We've taken a real deep dive today into clinical communication, all those nuances, from building that initial rapport and making complex stuff simple, to handling tough emotions, and even thinking about the power of how you actually sound, your delivery.
Yeah, the insights from this guide, they feel incredibly valuable, not just for doctors or nurses, obviously, but really for anyone who wants to get better at connecting, explaining things clearly, and truly understanding people in any conversation where the stakes feel a bit high.
We really hope this deep dive gives you a bit of a shortcut, helps you feel well informed, maybe gives you some surprising facts, and definitely some practical strategies you can use.
Which leaves us with, perhaps, a final question for you to think about. If you really worked on mastering these kinds of communication techniques, how might that transform things? Not just your professional life, but maybe your personal relationships too. Could it help build deeper trust, better understanding, and pretty much any challenging discussion you face?